Oh, hello there, yeah. Well, it's Sunday, isn't it? Yeah, God's Day. We think about all those great Bible stories. Yeah, in particular, like maybe the Good Samaritan. Yes, coming across, an injured person on the road and, deciding just to leave them there because there's probably a tunnel underneath them and it's just giving succour to terrorists, isn't it? Yeah, you can't do that. Anyway, the British media was in fine fettle at the weekend, and I thought we'd just have a little look at, people digging their heels in when reality, unfortunately, isn't going their particular way. From the sublime, perhaps, to the ridiculous, and certainly there's a ridiculous one at the end, but the sublime would have to be Sarah Pachin writing in the Daily Express. Yes, the disgraceful link between crime and immigration no one is talking about except reform. Yeah, frank and honest conversation needed about the effects of Labour's mass migration experiment, writes Sarah. Yeah, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, she can write? Because, after all, given the quality of, reform MPs and councillors, it might well be one of those hurdles that many of them would fail. Still, I was quite shocked at the idea that no one's talking about this, because as far as I can make out from my social media and other feeds, you don't see anything else, do you? Especially, being led by the Reform Party, who, let's not forget, have a total of, let me try and think, there's a leader, deputy leader, there's the chief whip, and there's her. Oh, no, it's four, isn't it? Yeah. Because, of course, the parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party and various unionist parties at the moment, as well as Reform, are all talking about this. So I'm not entirely sure what Sarah's going on about, but that is the usual thing. You might say to yourself, well, but perhaps there are other parties out there. Yes, there are, but obviously we're not going to talk about, the Lib Dems and the Greens, who have basically over 85 MPs, or certainly about 85 MPs between them, because that would just be stupid and mean that we lived in a representative democracy. Can't have that. Far, far, far better to have Sarah Pachin telling us all about it with her undoubted skills as a human. Anyway, yes. One of the odd things, if you like, about the British press is even when they are staring utter defeat, if you like, in the face, they won't let go. They will just simply ride out any storm because they have the money to do it. After all, they just simply have the money to do it. It doesn't matter what tosh the Daily Telegraph will print, because there's a hardcore of people that will read it who will believe any old tripe, as long as it's right-wing tripe. And there's been this big push recently to make us feel very, very unhappy about this young person, Avatar David. Okay, Hamas released images of starving Israeli hostages. Footage feels like a million punches to the heart, says sister, as terrorists try to weaponize starvation. Yeah. Now, I'm expected to feel very sorry for this individual, and in many ways I do, on a basic human level. However, you can see the bit of a hole that there is in the entire thing here, because if I'm supposed to be unhappy about him starving, how am I supposed to feel about other people, very large numbers of them, who are also starving? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure how my emotions are supposed to be, but I don't know, there's been a big push on this. You will notice you go through these phases with the apologists for the regime, and they will go through these different phases about what they think's vitally important. At the moment, it's starving hostages, which is dreadful. You shouldn't starve hostages. But in a starvation zone, I'm not entirely surprised that they don't have a lot of food. Pardon me. It might seem callous, but I don't actually think that it is. It's no more callous than the Daily Telegraph, let's face it, or indeed any of the others that are out there. We had this from Charles Moore. The British terms for recognition of Palestine are not addressed to Hamas or Israel. Sir Keir Starmer has no leverage with either side in the Gaza war. He merely seeks to appease Muslims in Britain. Yeah, you see? And again, it's one of those, let's think of another way that we can still be right. And in this case, it means that whatever Britain does, it makes no difference in the international international scene. Yeah, okay, we could join with the other 75% of countries in the world who basically back the Palestinian people and having a Palestinian state, definitely going for a two-state solution, because you kind of need two states for that, don't you, realistically? Or we could side with a handful of other big, powerful, brutally armed countries and decide not to. But in this case, what it is, of course, is that we mustn't give in not just to the terrorists who were Muslim, but we mustn't give in to the Muslims who are also terrorists in this country, which neatly fits into perhaps where Sarah Pachin was coming from as well, because let's face it, all these people who shouldn't be here are definitely foreigners, and definitely we mustn't give in to the terror Muslims voting for Labour. Yeah, Sir Charles Moore. Yeah, Boris Johnson's boss when it comes down to it, even when he was Prime Minister. Darling individual. Yeah, and again, there was quite a bit of this stuff over at the weekend, whereby it can't possibly be a real thing. So therefore we have to say, well, it must be a conspiracy then. And on a deeper level, you can always rely on Brendan O'Neill to write utter cack. Here he is. Why are so many British babies being given the same name as a murderous Hamas terrorist? Not a single Keir was born in 2024, yet some 583 infants now share their name with the architect of October the 7th. Yes, I don't know. Maybe it's a common name, Brendan. But I'm sure I could think of a few terrorists that are called Brendan from the last, let's say 35 years. Certainly some O'Neills as well, because we all know, right, them Irish people, I mean, they're all terrorists, aren't they? Certainly a lot of the British press, certainly the Daily Telegraph would have been full of that, yeah. All those times in the 1980s when there was a possibility of peace deal on the table, which could have saved loads and loads of people from having their limbs ripped off and their lives ruined. But no, we mustn't give in to the terrorists. Yeah, thanks Margaret Thatcher. Could have had a peace deal in the late 1970s, early 1980s, but not because of Thatcher. Thank you very much indeed. Mustn't give in to the terrorists until you do actually give in and talk to them, of course, because that's the way that the real world works, but not that you know that from reading the Daily Telegraph. And think about that, a broadsheet newspaper that doesn't deal with actual real world politics. Astounding, isn't it? It's almost like they're run by some sort of, rich oligarch who really doesn't care. And speaking of just not caring, I don't know, one always thinks, is there a new low that Melanie Phillips can reach? Melanie Phillips, she was the friend of certain shooters of Norwegian school children a few years ago. Yes, she hates to be reminded of that, but astoundingly she's still got a job, and here she is with this one, which oddly enough on Twitter got quite a lot of negative replies to her. Zoran Madami leads among Jewish voters by a 17-point margin in the race to become New York City mayor. Yes, he's very, very popular across the board with just about everybody, including Jewish voters. Big part of his mass appeal in New York across the age range is Jewish voters. Just let that one sink in for a little bit before Madame gets going. Madami, a Shia 12er Islamist. Oh dear, imagine being an Islamist if you belong to Islam. That would be awful, wouldn't it? Yeah, be like being a Christian or a Zionist if you were Jewish, maybe something like that. Except, of course, he's not actually that extreme. But let's not worry about that. He did definitely not say to globalise the intifada, so we can always throw that one at him, even though it's completely a lie. Still, odd that, this person is so anti-Jewish by nature is so popular. Odd that. Let's try and find out why, shall we? We'll bankrupt and Islamise New York. Both at the same time, yeah, and pose a threat to its Jewish community, yeah, who are totally unaware that he's a Muslim guy, I guess, yeah, totally unaware of this, despite the fact, blanket, wall-to-wall, millions and millions of $1 million of TV ads from, all of the awful right-wing hack people that the Democrats have put up, Como and the rest of them, right, really appalling, the worst sort of Keir Starmer front bench that you can imagine, these people. After all of that, for some weird reason, the Jewish population in New York are behind him. Anyway, with their Pavlovian reflex to support the Democratic Party, yeah, these people don't think straight, not like our Melanie, and its anti-West, anti-white and anti-Jewish ideological dogmas, I wonder who else we could apply that to. It was entirely predictable that before long these US Jews would themselves become a threat to the Jewish people. That moment has arrived. Yes, indeed. You see, you have to be a particular type of Jewish person to be Jewish enough. Otherwise you're a capo, aren't you, yeah? Otherwise, well, I don't know. I don't know what Melanie might do about that. Why doesn't she suggest, I don't know, somehow getting rid of them? Maybe we should have a concerted bombing campaign or something. Or maybe we should just fence people off. We could set up a ghetto, couldn't we, to make sure that these people are there, where they can be concentrated in one space and they don't pose a threat. And then maybe if they start to starve and disease runs rampant or something like that, we could airdrop them stuff. But of course, we have to ban journalists from filming from the air, just in case it looked bad. Because we'd be the most moral people in the world, making sure that only a few people starve. Yeah, that would be the important part. And then we'd release pictures of maybe a hostage or two that looked a bit under the weather or starving, and it would just prove how right Melanie was. But I don't know quite how number one, that this woman is still employed by the Times on a regular basis. Who the hell is the constituency? Well, the answer is the owner of the Times, in very much the same way as all of these people are. It's all just about a meta-narrative, and it's not about Gaza, it's not about Palestine, it's not even about Jewish people when it comes down to it. It's about you must not hold views that, broadly speaking, are seen as left-coded. I mean, Palestine has been an issue ever since I've been politically aware, and a long time before that, okay? Because, I became politically aware in the mid-1970s. It's been an issue before that. I can remember in the 80s various Zionists coming up to me when, I was involved in student politics, saying about how dreadful it was and what scum of the earth the Palestinians were, along with all those black people in South Africa that were demanding their rights as well. They were very often tied together. Odd that South Africa is one of those, pariah nations now. That is just doing what 75% of the rest of the world's nations are doing in terms of just being able to use their eyes and their brains. Anyway, talking of eyes and brains, and I said to the sublime to the ridiculous, Kevin Nister, who, for those of you that don't recall, was a teacher who misgendered one of his pupils quite deliberately and quite provocatively, and then cried all the way to his tribunal hearing, which was dismissed, and then he appealed, and that has been dismissed, and he's got another tribunal hearing whereby basically he's insisting that he should be allowed to become a teacher because he's just a perfectly reasonable human being. But again, he put this up, which I've got to share with you. Read about Stalin. I have, mate. For all his evil, for all that, right? He never abused children in the systematic ways we see across the UK. In fact, the opposite. During the German invasion, he ensured high-quality schools and the best of Russian culture was available to Russian children as best he could. Yes. Now, I'll leave a link down below. You can see my particular exchange with him. But I did have to point out that, he was an evil, murderous person who basically didn't care about his two legitimate sons, loved his daughter, probably, we're not entirely sure, but certainly was very abusive to his two sons to the extent that they died, one of them in German captivity because Stalin decided that he didn't really want him back and the Germans could just shoot him. Right? And anyway, I don't really know what Kevin's going on about here because I'm sorry, but a bit like a hostage compared to tens of thousands, if not millions of starving people, I have to weigh up the pile of bodies on one side compared to Russian culture being taught in schools in the 1940s. But what Kevin is talking about here is, of course, isn't the Russian cultures, or indeed Stalin, who was a lovely man. He's talking about, his view of the world, his particular little Christian view of the world, which says that there are greater crimes than mass murder, which is basically, allowing kids to use preferred pronouns. I'll leave you to ponder that particular one, right? Okay? thousands upon tens of thousands upon hundreds of thousands upon millions of people that Stalin realistically had a direct hand in killing, many of whom were children, let's face it, compared to pronoun use, or maybe, I don't know, the occasional, if they're over 18, use of hormones. I'll leave you to weigh up those two, because Kevin can't. And as I had to say to him at the end, I wish him well with his appeals at the tribunal, but might suggest that he might not want to come out with a similar argument because it doesn't quite sit very well with any rational human being. A bit like, I don't know, let's say leader writers in the Telegraph or the Times, inventing mysterious conspiracies because the real world that stares them in the face is too much for them to deal with, and it's left coded, and that will never do. So you'd better believe that the reason why certain names are popular is because of an Islamist plot, says the guy with the Irish sounding terrorist style name. Don't trust him. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. I remember the 70s. I remember the bombs, mate. Do have a lovely Sunday. Do remember to go to church if you can. And do remember, all of them parables, they're all wrong. Okay? Enjoy.